We're now joined by Evan Miyakawa, friend of the show, longtime friend of the show, of EvanMia.com, here on 365 Sports Basketball Analytics, college basketball expert, numbers man, just all-around good dude. And, Evan, we appreciate your time, as always, man. We were just talking as we were waiting your arrival about that game last night in Lubbock, Texas Tech and Arizona State. Don't know how many people were expecting a game like that, but what were your thoughts on that thriller? And man, Grant McCasland at Texas Tech, they are a very solid basketball team, are they not?
The Big 12 has this ability to produce really entertaining games that you're not expecting, and that game last night was certainly one of those. It was not on my radar in terms of most anticipated games, but that was such a thrilling double overtime game. Texas Tech almost lost it at several points in regulation and overtime. You know, they finally squeezed it in the end there, but just a great back and forth, and really I think it speaks to a lot of the pieces that Texas Tech has. They have a lot of veteran guys. Darion Williams was one of their strongest players early in the season, but now you're seeing guys like JT Toppin, who was their big transfer portal get in the offseason. He scores over 40 points last night. And then you have a freshman like Christian Anderson, who, as the game progressed, got better and better. I have been high on this Texas Tech team the whole year. They obviously were a little slow to start, but now I view them as one of the top 7 or 8 teams in the country, one of the best teams in the Big 12. And, you know, obviously beating Arizona State at home isn't their biggest accomplishment to date, but the fact that they're able to, you know, not drop one in a tough game down the stretch, I think is really big. I love Texas Tech. They're one of the best 3-point shooting teams in the country, so there's a lot to love. And I think at this point, they're more than just a Final Four sleeper. I think they're really on people's radars. And because of the fact that they lost some games early in the season, they're going to be stronger than what their seed is going to represent in the tournament, and that's going to make them a popular pick by many to go further than what you might expect from someone on their seed line.
Evan, can Baylor get it together fast enough with 4 guards? Well, really 6 guards and 1 power forward. I mean, that's what they're going to be playing, is 6 guards and a power forward.
It's dicey. I mean, I think we saw it in their last game where Norchad Omier has to stay out of foul trouble, because if he fouls out, you're basically left with nothing really that resembles a true front court player, and he's even undersized as he is. And so even if he is going to stay out of foul trouble, he has to be a lot more lenient defensively to not really challenge. And so that's really tough, and this team has not caught any breaks this year. Just as soon as they get a healthy roster, you have someone else get injured. So, you know, at least their guards are back, but missing big Josh on the inside is certainly a problem. And so the nice thing is they still do have a couple weeks to kind of figure out what is their approach going to be, but it certainly does limit their ceiling, and there's just going to be games, especially against really strong front courts, where it's going to be pretty hard for them to mount a challenge there. So, you know, the tough thing for Baylor is that, you know, they're on the right side of the cut line right now. I think most people project them as an 8 or 9 seed based on their wins and losses. I have them in that territory as well. They do have some easier games on their schedule coming up. It's a lighter end to their schedule in Big 12 play, which is good. I think that's a good thing for them to be able to work out some of these kinks, but it also means they still have the potential to lose a game or two because of this front court issue if they can't get it figured out.
So, Arizona is a bit of an anomaly to me, because some nights they look great, and other nights they just, and I guess it's all on Caleb Love. Like, they kind of ride the wave of how hot he is. Can Arizona make a dent later on in the year, or is this a team that's just a little too spotty to rely on?
I would be even higher on them if they hadn't lost one of their biggest pieces earlier in the year in Krivas, who is their starting center and talked in amongst coaching circles on that team as potentially being their most important player this year. They've had other guys step up. Henry Visar has been awesome down the stretch for them as a big, and Toby Awaka has had some good games as well, the transfer from Tennessee. So I think this team, roster-wise, talent-wise, is one of the top 15 teams in the country, and they didn't really fulfill that earlier in the season. Similar to Texas Tech, it was a little bit dicey. They were at one point, I think, maybe 4-5, and for sure on the outside of the tournament picture, but they've had a great run of games in Big 12 play. I do think when you're ultimately relying on a guy like Caleb Love to win games for you down the stretch, you're probably a little bit limited just because he's very hit or miss, and he'll take his shots and he'll make some and he'll miss some. We certainly saw his heroics, a couple weeks ago at home against Iowa State, where he hit that half court shot to take it to overtime, and then they end up winning that game. But I still believe a lot in this team. I think they're really balanced. I think they have a good offense. I think they have a good defense. I have them ranked 12th in the country right now in terms of how they're predicted to do going forward. So I do really like this team. I wouldn't put them in the top 3 or 4 teams in the Big 12. I think that belongs to Houston and Iowa State and Texas Tech, but I think they're right there outside of that group. And so they certainly have a lot of potential.
I'm not sure how many teams in the country have lost 6 straight games to turn around and win 6 straight games, but Kansas State has done just that, gone from dead in the water to hottest team in the country. Evan, why have they been able to do that? What have been your thoughts, and what do you think about just now them with all this momentum moving forward?
This is one of the biggest storylines in the sport right now. And part of it, too, is not just because we've not often seen or rarely ever seen teams who start this poorly like Kansas State and then turn it around in a conference like the Big 12. But the storylines about this team coming into the year were fascinating. Coleman Hawkins reportedly got more NIL money than any other player in the transfer portal, and Kansas State had one of the biggest war chests based on what people knew from public conversations in terms of what they offered their players, and Jerome Tang flipped almost his entire roster. And so for me personally, I thought they had a really high ceiling, but also a really low floor coming into this year. And we've ended up seeing both. We've seen how bad they can be. We've now seen also how good they can be. And so I think the thing that's cool is that Jerome Tang seems to always instill in his teams this big game mentality. When they're playing their toughest competition, they're always going to have an edge to them. That's what we're seeing in this last 6 or 7 games. And when you look at on my team metrics, there's a metric I track called opponent strength adjustment, which looks at how much better do you play against the top teams on your schedule versus the worst teams. And Kansas State is one of the top teams in the country at playing up to competition. So when they play some of the best teams on their schedule, they are up for it. When they play some of the worst teams on their schedule, they can often kind of play down to competition and not win as convincingly as they should, or drop bunnies that they shouldn't. But now that we're in the thick of Big 12 play and they've got hard matchups every single day, I think that bodes well for them. And I certainly hope they continue it because it's really fun to watch.
So the SEC is ridiculously dominant. They are very good. Auburn, Alabama, Florida, Tennessee, all crazy, crazy good. That's not to mention that A&M is good, Kentucky is good, pretty much most of the league good. Texas is probably a better team than most in the country, but they're on the cusp of watching their bubble burst in the next week if they don't really get it together. Yeah. Do you think so? I mean, am I right on that one?
Yeah, I think Texas, just in terms of their wins and losses, has a lot of work to do.
Yeah.
But the crazy thing is that, you look at this SEC of 14, 15 teams, and you have 12, 13 of them who legitimately have tournament hopes. That's insane. Obviously, the conference size is inflated, but when you're talking about 85% of your conference having a shot at getting in the tournament, that just speaks to how good this conference is. And then you have the elite teams at the top 2. Auburn and Alabama are facing this weekend, and they're number 1 and number 2 in the country. Florida, in terms of their recent track record, arguably right now is the hottest team in the SEC, above those 2 teams. So yeah, it's really interesting. I think, some of those teams kind of in the bottom that are fighting their way to get in, like in Arkansas, like a Texas, Georgia's been slipping a little bit. They're probably going to moan a little bit about the fact that they don't have any easy games in this conference. But overall, that's just because this conference is so good that the nice thing for any of these teams is that you can't really take any bad losses outside of maybe losing a home game to South Carolina or LSU. Other than that, all of these teams are inside the top 60 nationally on my website. So that means any of them are good enough to beat anybody else on any given night. It is such a slog, and you just can't ever take anything for granted for sure.
This is not going to happen, but if the whole Final Four was them, like it would be less shocking than it would in any other year.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I don't think that's going to happen, but if we're talking about even getting 3 SEC teams in the Final Four, I think it's more likely than we've ever seen. Obviously, the tournament can be weird, and we could go into the tournament with the SEC having 3 of the 4 number 1 seeds and a couple 2s, 3s, and 4s, and then get to the Final Four, and it's like 2 ACC teams, a Big Ten team, and a Big East team. That's just kind of how the tournament goes, but certainly if any conference could get 3 teams in the Final Four, if not 4, again, not likely, but this would be the year for the SEC to do it.
Go ahead.
Yeah, let me ask real quick while we're on the topic of the SEC. Just how much anticipation do you have for Auburn, Alabama coming up? And, I mean, we know just the history with those two anyways, but you add in 1, 2 historical perspectives and all of that. What are your thoughts on that matchup?
I mean, this is the best game we're probably going to see this season in terms of on paper. And the fun thing about it, too, is you just have all of these storylines galore. I learned recently that this is the best matchup or the best ranked that Auburn and Alabama have been at the same time in any sport. We're including football in that. They've never been ranked 1, 2 in any other sport. This is certainly the best matchup that they've ever had against each other in basketball. Neither of them have ever matched up against each other even as top 10 teams before. And of course they're bitter rivals. It's great. And the other thing too is that both of these teams have incredible offenses. Auburn has the top offense in the country. Alabama has the second best offense. So not only is this going to be an elite matchup, it should be a really fun one. The projected score that I have for this game is both teams getting over 85 points. So we're expecting a barn burner, and obviously the crowd's going to be in it. So there's really not anything that you could knock on this matchup for having all the hype. It's going to be great.
Yeah, Evan, how for real is St. John's?
Oh, I think they're very for real. And I think the thing about St. John's that's a little bit interesting about them is they have some of the stereotypical things you'll see with an elite Rick Pitino team. Defensively, they are outstanding. I have them number 3 in the country in defensive rating per my website. They grind you. They force you to do things that you don't want to do. Their offense is a bit lacking, and when you look at some of the common trends you'll see in good offenses these days, they're not good at shooting the 3. Their field goal percentages across the board aren't great, but they make up for that in other ways, and defensively, they are just going to assert themselves. And so, I have them 15th right now in the country, so that's not quite in the top group of teams, but it's certainly a team that has Final Four potential. We've not been saying that about St. John's in a long time. And then when you have a coach like Rick Pitino at the helm, obviously he's as experienced as anybody. He's one of the best coaches in the country. And the way that he has turned this roster around in just a year or two has been pretty remarkable. He's gotten guys that fit exactly what he wants to do. And they really seem to be playing well on the big stages. And so I think they're legit.
Can you run some numbers for me on who Florida State should hire as their basketball coach? I want to know. Look, it's probably going to be Luke Laux, who's in the NBA right now, or Sam Cassell. I was kind of hoping for Will Wade, but they haven't put me in charge yet, Evan.
You got to give Dan Hurley a call.
Okay. Yeah, let me go from a basketball powerhouse to a place where they play in the Donald L. Tucker Civic Center. Like, there's still a big door that they have to put in for the truck pulls there. So, yeah, I'm sure he's going to love that. I'm sure he's going to love that. Evan Miyakawa, evanmiya.com, MIYA. Please go to it. If you're a basketball fan, this is the place you got to go. He has got numbers and analytics all over the site. Evan, thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
Thank you, guys. This was great.
All right. Talk to you soon, Evan.